and fighting against foreclosures and making demands saying, we refuse to be treated like we're less than human because we built the fortunes of these huge companies. So, what happens? When you're standing in a bread line, you may hate everybody next to you because they're different than you, but if everybody shuts up for a minute and kind of listens real carefully, everybody's stomach is growling and singing the same music. It's the universal language. Everybody's stomach kind of growls the same, some a little higher, some a little lower. Okay? And you start finding that common ground about, hey, we're all screwed here, regardless of who we are and how different we may be. That's our commonality. That's our common humanity. So what starts to build? Growing solidarity between black and white workers. And I'm not leaving out the Latinos or Asian Pacific Islanders because there weren't very many in Detroit at the time. Okay, so it's a primarily black-white story. Other parts of the country it looks different. Particularly white folks started realizing, hey, we can't be fighting and hating the blacks because we're playing into the traps of the boss. So let's start sticking together, finding our common ground, finding that common humanity, that if we fight together and work together, fight together, not fight each other, we can move forward. So let's go to March 7th, 1932. It's a cold day. Wind's blowing out of the north. Thousands of people are marching through my grandparents' neighborhood, black and white, shoulder to shoulder, unarmed, nonviolent, marching to the main front gate of Ford's called the Rouge. It's the biggest industrial complex in the world. They have these demands. We want our jobs back. You guaranteed us work, an end to foreclosures, an end to evictions, free health care, 5 tons of coal to heat our homes because we're cold, an end to having bribing company officials for jobs, an end to discrimination against blacks in housing and employment and welfare, and last but not least, the right to organize a union. Okay? This is the community-wide demand. They get there, they're at the main plant gate, Detroit police, Dearborn police, and company gunmen open up on them with rifles and pistols, and in 5 minutes, 5 are dead, 75 are wounded, and they open up on them with water cannons. Okay, it is a massacre. And they're forced to retreat, carrying their dead and wounded, soaked to the bone, in bitterly cold weather with strong winds. How many of you have ever heard this story before? Raise your hand. Okay? Not very many of you. They left this out of the history books for good reasons, because they don't want you to know where you came from and who you are. Okay? It's the deliberate thing. It's not by accident. Henry Ford was a great American hero, but he helped organize a massacre. Okay?
He was alcoholic, too.
And he was a scumbag all the way around. 4 days later, 100,000 people came to the funeral march because they understood that the massacre in Dearborn was an attack against every working person, whether you were employed or unemployed, regardless of where you came from and what religion you believed or sexual orientation or gender or whatever. They're going to kill us. And so people are saying, we're going to fight back. And so a new spirit is building in the land that we're not going to take this anymore. We're fighting for our families, we're fighting for the future, but we're also fighting to survive. And we want to thrive, not just survive. So a new strategy gets built in the labor movement, in the labor movement community, and that is, the old thing was you'd go out on strike, and then thousands of desperate, hungry strikebreakers would break through your lines, and you'd be replaced, and you'd lose the strike. Okay? So they said, forget about walking out, we're going to sit down, we're going to occupy the place. It's called the sit-down strike. And we're going to barricade ourselves in it. We're not going to leave until we get a union contract. This starts in meat packing in Minnesota. It spreads through Ohio to the rubber industry, and finally comes to Flint, Michigan in January 1937. Flint is the backbone of General Motors, which is the biggest and most powerful corporation in the history of the planet to that point. They got 9 plants there, and a small auto workers union. It's only got 20,000 members. They managed to storm 5 of these plants and barricade themselves in. This is the Occupy movement of the 1930s. Occupy Wall Street wasn't new. They were using a labor tactic, except they were doing it in a park rather than inside of the factories. So the workers are barricaded in. There's one Occupy movement here. And the other Occupy movement is called the National Guard, with tanks, machine guns, rifles, bayonets, pistols, and hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition. Now, you didn't have to be a genius in Flint to remember Dearborn, because Dearborn's 50 miles away. Everybody knew about Dearborn. Okay? So, the question is, what's going to happen here? The new governor, Frank Murphy, Irish-American hero of mine, my people, he's been elected with overwhelming labor support, and he says, as long as the workers remain nonviolent, we will not fire on anybody. We are the peacekeepers. So, a siege breaks out. General Motors is furious. They ask Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, bring in the army. Roosevelt says, we're not bringing in the army. Murphy's got it under control, negotiate with GM. So meanwhile, there are no supermarkets inside of auto plants. So you can starve them out, right? So what do? They put out a call to people all over the Midwest, come to Flint to defend us. Serve as human shields and engage in mass picketing, and we're going to do it 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, so they can't attack the plants when we're asleep. And thousands of people came and slept in the homes of the strikers, and they shared their meager rations and said, this is our fight. And I get choked up because I grew up in these stories. These were my people. Some of them went up to Flint and said, this is our fight. We remember Grandpa. So, the siege begins. Now these are the women. These white things here are called axe handles. They're a tool. I'm not an advocate of violence, so don't go there. But the women are out in the streets en masse, along with a lot of other people in the community, and saying, you are not going to slaughter our men. You're going to have to come through us to get out. Okay? And in order to get food in, they had to bring them in trucks. So they'd get 100 or 200 tickets, and they would surround the trucks, and they'd walk at 3 miles an hour through the streets of Flint, through the snowdrifts, with the truck, till they get the truck there, unload the food. The truck would go back to where they had more food, and you'd walk back to wherever it was, and they'd load up another truck, and then you'd do your picket duty, guarding the trucks while they've got the rest of the people surrounding these plants to make sure they can't make a lightning strike and try and storm them and drive the workers out. This siege goes on day after day after day. Okay? And sisters and brothers, on the 44th day, General Motors surrendered, the Union wins, and that's where the auto workers began to build their power. Let's hear it for our brothers and sisters in Flint. In 2 years, the Auto Workers Union grew from 20 to 400,000 members, as sit-down strikes swept the country. And it became, this is our time, we've been beaten down for decades, we're not going to take it anymore, we're going to seize the future, and we're going to write the history, not let it be written on top of our backs and with our blood. So what happens when this great wave of sit-down strikes and labor and the community come together like never before? This is the percentage of the workforce in the country that's unionized. It's basically 12% for 35 years. This is Flint. In 2 years, the labor movement doubles in size. They said it couldn't be done, and our ancestors did it. And 751 is founded right here. Okay, and you're part of this great victory that changed the course of history. Don't ever forget it. By 1945, we're at 35%. We're still above 30% in the early 60s. We come down. Here's where I lost my job with Reagan. We're down at 12%, which is lower than it was before Flint. And in the private sector, the red line, it's as low as it's been since 1900. Okay? I forgot my watch, pardon me. Okay? Corporate America is out to destroy you, annihilate you, and make you a footnote in the history books. And we cannot let them do it. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. We won these huge victories. They said it couldn't be done, and I say people like us can do it again.
We have to.
We got to figure out new strategies, new tactics, and build power in a new way, above and beyond what we had before, to take on corporations like Boeing and General Electric and all these other folks who don't believe that we're human. They treat us, they treat you, they treat us as if we're not as worth as much as the machinery in their plants. So after we built this power, that's the rise of the American middle class. And your history here, which is a beautiful history, it's got all these victories that you led the fight in this state to create. It was shared by literally millions of other